Hi guys, welcome to episode 15 of Tiger Heart Chats. I am super happy to be back. It's been a couple of weeks since we've done one of these, but I wanted to make sure I had someone extra special for you. She is one of the coolest people I've just spoken to prior to recording this Tiger Heart Chat, and we just started going off on a tangent. I'm really sad that I didn't manage to push record before that, but please welcome to the stage the author, the neuroscientist, the creator of Neurolanguage Coaching, Rachel Palin.
Good morning, Sanj. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm as excited as you are, really.
I am so happy because your team contacted me about getting on this chat. I started to do some research into you and I watched about 15 of your videos. My wife and I watched them. We fell in love with not just your methodology, but what you're talking about and your personality as well. You've got so much energy. It's a true pleasure to get you on the call.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I've got 2 fans. Wow. Thank you so much.
You've got more than 2 fans. So there's going to be a few people on this call who don't know much about you. Please tell us who you are and what you're about.
Okay, well, my name is Rachel, as you said, and I am British. However, I did in fact move away from Britain when I was 17. And that's part of, I think, what we'll be talking about today. And throughout my life, you know, it seems that things were moving in different directions and different things happening, but there was always a common thread in my life, and that was languages and teaching languages. And about 12 years ago, I started to develop my own business with language teaching and developing language learning. And I trained as a coach. And from there, it moved into coaching, to neuroscience, and to actually creating what is neurolanguage coaching, which is a different way of delivering language learning. So in a nutshell, that's maybe the introduction. There have been a lot of things on the way there, Sanj.
Tell us in depth about what neurolanguage coaching is.
It is about bringing the professional side of coaching. So, you know, a lot of people call themselves a coach. And that's fine because it really is not a regulated business. Anybody can call themselves a coach. However, when you do coaching training, it really opens your eyes to the fact that professional coaching is a skill, and it is a trained skill. It's about changing the way that we communicate. It's about learning how to empower, how to tap into potential, how to really get the best from somebody, how to accompany somebody in that process as well, because it's a very, very emotional process. Plus, from the professional side of coaching, we're bringing in standards, ethics, guidelines, principles and competences of being a coach. Now, all of that is coming into the language learning process and actually into the learning process. So the teacher becomes a coach. It's a great transformation. Plus, with neurolanguage, what we are doing is we're adding in the principles of neuroscience, helping us to understand how the brain functions, learns, and reacts. And in practical terms, because, you know, we have so much theory, we have so much neuroscience, but one of the major problems is we don't know how to implement it.
Right.
And neurolanguage coaching is about implementing it, living it, being it, and transmitting it to the learner so that the learner is able to potentially learn more effectively because it's absolutely personalized and potentially faster. We're looking at getting people to have instant neural connections. That's what we're looking for.
For reference for people that are listening, how do you define the difference between being a teacher and being a coach?
I always ask one question, and I'm going to ask it to you now. Do you like to be told what to do?
I'll be completely honest, no.
Right, and I asked this to a room full of 300 teachers, and everybody says no. I ask this to children, they all say no. Honestly, we do not like to be told what to do. That's the basic nature of human beings. But in a teaching situation, we are constantly feeding our learners with directives. Do this, do that, repeat this, repeat that. And we're doing it in a way which I actually think is irritating for the brain. Subconsciously, or maybe consciously. But it is that constant do this. And when you become a coach, you start to understand that every single thing that we say as an educator has an impact on our learner. So one of the first steps is that we have to soften those directives. We really have to be much more, how about we do this? What do you think about that? May we move on? How about if we repeat that? That sort of approach then starts coming into that coach approach. And that's the first major difference. The way that we communicate is different. And teachers, I think as well, you know, I actually always hear that everybody's saying teachers, coaches, we should all be empathetic. I actually think that we need to move away from the empathy into compassion.
Right.
And I don't mean move away from it. I mean move beyond empathy. Compassion actually ignites different areas of the brain. And compassion means I feel what you feel, but what can we do about it?
Wow.
And so many times we have teachers who are actually being extremely empathetic, which is fantastic. And when somebody says, I can't do this, I can't do that, the teacher is then trying to convince, oh, yes, you can. I think you're good at this. And we try to convince people, you know, we know that you can do it. But that person is actually feeling that they can't, and they're not changing that feeling. We're trying to convince them to change it.
Okay.
Compassion would then mean, I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. What do we need to do to help you to feel better here? And that's what we need to do more around in the world. I think, you know, not only as educators, but as parents, as friends, everybody, we need to be listening to that person who is in that particular state and saying, I really hear you. I feel what you're feeling. What can I do to help?
So how does that tie in with this term that you've coined, the Neurolanguage Coaching? My assumption is, just from reading that terminology, and this is for people that are listening, it's about understanding how the mind learns language. How did you apply that approach to that format?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing is changing the conversation. So we change into a brain-friendly coaching communication. Secondly, we're bringing in the principles of neuroscience. Now, some of the major tenets are, firstly, the person who does it learns it. So as educators, we have to stop doing it for them. We have to stop spoon feeding. We really have to go back to that Socratic way of getting people to think for themselves, getting people to do it themselves. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is the breaking it down. We, as an educator, really have to understand, how do we break material? How do we break language down into bite-sized chunks?
Wow.
That are then going to be digestible for that particular learner, because the next principle that we have to follow is that everybody is different. Every brain is different. We may have the same basic functions, but your genetic input, your lifelong input into your brain is totally different to mine. So your interpretation of the world is totally different to mine. And I, as an educator, need to know, how do you learn? What do you need? And maybe you even have a preferred way of learning. So all of these, I'm going to say, principles and tenets from the neuroscience, we're actually incorporating it into the neurolanguage coaching process.
Yeah.
I've created a framework, a structure. We do a very particular goal setting relating to grammar of the language, and a goal setting relating to functional language. And we really have that neuroscience manifesting consistently. Plus, we talk to our learners about the brain.
Right.
Wherever we can, we share with them what's happening. You know, honestly, I think that language learning is one of the most, shall we say, embarrassing things to learn in life. Because we really expose ourselves. You know, I've been there. I know, you know, you feel so silly, different. It sounds funny. And when you are in that position of feeling that way, it could be that actually parts of the brain start shutting down. If we go into a fight or flight, we get the blocks, we might get the stutters, everything interrupts the language flow. So we have to understand, how can we coach our learners around those moments?
I just finished a course online at Harvard called Leaders of Learning. There was one module that focused on neuroscience, and you just touched on that fight or flight aspect of when your prefrontal cortex is switched off, your mind goes into panic mode. That can be a huge problem for someone that's learning, because they are, instead of trying to absorb the information in a rational way, they're looking for a quick exit, which has a detrimental effect on how and what they're learning about. How did you get into this field? You're very passionate about this. What was the thing that connected you to this concept?
It's been one of those Steve Jobs moments of life, when you look back at your life and you start connecting the dots.
Yeah.
And it really has been like that for me. It's been quite phenomenal. I moved to Spain when I was 17. I actually fell in love when I was 15. I taught myself Spanish at that age.
Wow.
I took all of my father's teach yourself Spanish books. The motivation obviously was key. And I really taught myself Spanish at that age. When I moved to Spain at 17, one of the first jobs I had was actually teaching English. So I started teaching English from a very, very young age, and I was at a school for adults for about 5 years. And then I moved on to do many other different things in life, but all the way in the background, I was always teaching.
Wow.
Private clients, groups, so I left school when I was 16, 17. I started working when I was 17, and as I said, I did other things in life. So I did things like working in an office and learning how to do accounts. I then had my own business with my husband, so I learned how to run a business. At the age of 24, my brother-in-law, who I will be eternally grateful for, in Spain, and by the way, at this point I was speaking Spanish all the time in Spain, so I was absolutely bilingual.
And whereabouts in Spain was this?
I lived near Barcelona in a place called Sitges. And my brother-in-law kept saying to me, Rachel, go back to school. Rachel, go to university. Rachel, come on. And he was the great inspiration that actually got me to do an access to university. So I did a university access, long distance University of Madrid.
Right.
I got into university and I started to do law. So I did 2 years of Spanish law. Then, unfortunately, I separated from my husband, went back to England, and I went to Sheffield University and did a BA law in Spanish.
Right.
And again, throughout my studies, I was studying law for 10 years, Sanj, and all through those years, I was teaching in the background to help me pay for my studies along the way.
And were you teaching languages?
Yes, I was teaching Spanish.
Wow.
And in Spain, I was teaching English. In England, I was teaching Spanish. So I was always teaching one or the other.
Yep.
And in the year 2000, after I got the BA, I then did a master's in human rights. And the master's was sponsored by a consortium of European universities. Only the creme de la creme from all over Europe got into this master's. I was one of the honored 90 people from all over Europe. And the master's took me to Venice for 6 months.
Wow.
And to the University of Bochum in Germany, in Ruhrgebiet, for 8 months. And when I was in the Ruhrgebiet, that's when I connected with a language school. And I started really full-time teaching at this language school in Germany, business clients and legal English as well.
Right.
And this particular man, his name was Jim, great, fantastic Scottish guy. He said to me, Rachel, I do language coaching, because he'd done this master's in education with a coaching module. And when I said to him, okay, Jim, what is it? What do I have to do if I'm doing language coaching? He said, well, just follow the client. Now, that was in the year 2000. And I didn't know, how do I distinguish myself between teacher and coach? And that was the start for me of opening that question of saying, what do I do that's different? So I started to study by the way, in the meantime, I actually went home and qualified as a lawyer. So I went back to England, qualified as a lawyer.
Yep.
And as soon as I finished that, then I went back to Germany to work with Jim again. And I did some coaching training. And I actually trained as a coach with David Rock, who does the Neuro leadership coaching. And that was my entry point in. At that point, his coaching was called Results Coaching System.
Yeah.
And it was combining coaching and neuroscience. And for me, it was that interesting point of, okay, how does that help us to come into language? Because and I met David Rock once, and he said to me, Rachel, you've got a language brain then, which I thought was a very interesting comment at that point. And yes, I do. I have a language brain. So for me, it was then, how do we develop something that is going to take the coaching, going to take the neuroscience, and it's going to provoke language connections? And that's how it all came about, and as I say, everything in my life fell into place.
That's a very important statement. Provoke language connections.
Yes.
That's an apex for someone that's trying to communicate an idea to a group of people. So how long have you been doing neuro-language coaching as a term?
Yes, 2012 is when I sat down in my garden. I will never forget. I sat down in my garden. I sent my partner at that time away. It was Easter. I was in Germany. It was Easter. In Germany, normally the weather is terrible, but that Easter, suddenly it was beautiful. It was like 30 degrees. It was March. I sent him away and I sat in the garden for 4 days and I wrote the manual.
Right. Okay.
And I honestly mean I sat in the garden in the day, but I did sleep at night. So I didn't continuously sit there for so many hours. But literally, it was almost like it just poured out of me. And that was the start. That was really the start. And I also have to thank my mentor, Richard Bentley. He was also behind me, helping me. So he'd helped me through the coaching training. Yep. He then became my mentor, and he really helped me to get the clear ideas. So I sat with the manual. I got the ICF accreditation. We're one of the only ones in the world with a language course which has and carries that ICF, the International Coach Federation accreditation. And we got that in 2013.
Wow. And so you've been doing it for 7 years now? Officially.
I have, yes. And we now have, and I'm absolutely thrilled and so grateful to them all, we have, I think, just over 700 neurolanguage coaches worldwide in 70 countries in the world.
That's incredible. These coaches, you've trained them ultimately.
Yes.
How long does the training process take?
It is a training course of 36 hours. Okay. Which doesn't sound a lot. Firstly, these educators, these language educators, they must come to me as fully fledged language educators. So they must either have a language teaching qualification, or they must have some sort of education in language teaching or training, or they must have proven experience of language teaching.
Right, I see.
And this process then is about transforming them into the coach and the neurolanguage coach and the actual process of neurolanguage coaching.
I've seen a couple of videos from coaches of yours. So anyone that's listening, if you check out the Neurolanguage Coaching Forum online, you'll see some of Rachel's videos. And there's lots of testimonials on there from these people that sound so liberated by what you've given them.
It is a transformational process. It really is. Throughout my life, I would say that I've transformed. With this concept, I have transformed. I continuously question my own brain. I continually look to liberate my own brain. And I actually think about 2 or 3 years ago, that was the first time that I really liberated my brain. And it's the same thing that's happening to many, many people who are doing the course. It's totally transformational. It's very deep. I had one person that's just finishing the course now, and he actually said to me, "Oh my gosh, Rachel, I didn't realize it was going to be so deep." It is, but obviously it's as deep as the people want to go on the course.
Right.
So ultimately, each and every one of us will go as deep as we want, or we can, or we feel. But yes, it is. And I do think, we're in transformational times.
Just from my experience from doing the Leaders of Learning course at Harvard, it just felt so nice to hear that people understand that human beings are evolving, and they're evolving dramatically, not just because of the tools around us, but because of the environment around us. I find that truly exciting. So how many languages do you know?
I, at the moment, will say that I know 6, and I'm learning 3 more from my own coaches. I actually am diving into Russian, and that was my sort of focus from last year to this year. And then before the summer, 2 of my coaches said, "Why don't you try learning some Greek?" And another one said, "Why don't you try some Chinese?" So I had a little bit of a challenge there going on. I confess that my Chinese is a little bit slow in the background, but yep. I'm starting to kind of get into it. I'm loving Greek. Right. I didn't realize I would, but I am loving it. But I did ancient Greek at school. So I think it's waking something up in my brain. And the Russian, I'm loving it. I'm really trying to see how I can get that more and more into my brain, because I can't wait to get back to Russia to see my Russian coaches.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because you've got coaches all over the world. So do you visit those coaches regularly?
Last year, I traveled all over. Obviously pre-COVID. Yeah. I would be traveling to conferences worldwide, and also I would be delivering training worldwide.
Amazing.
And the face-to-face training, then I would be with the coaches. And over the last couple of years, I now am developing teacher trainers in those countries. So now I've got some Russian teacher trainers who are now going to be delivering for the first time in Russian this autumn online.
Amazing.
We're going to be delivering in Polish. We already are delivering in Italy. We've got Daniela in Italy. We've got Juan Carlos in Peru, delivering in Spanish. We're going to start in German. We've already done in Slovakian. We're going to start in Arabic very soon. It's very exciting, honestly.
Wow.
It really is. So we're multiplying into the different languages.
And just with regards to your approach, is it really important for you to understand the languages that you're working with? For example, if I was a coach and I spoke Hindi, would it be important for you to learn that language for you to impart your skill set to them?
I would need to have definitely a common language with my coachee.
Right.
So if you're a beginner of English as a Hindi speaker, then I would say definitely I would need to speak Hindi so that we can communicate in a common language, and I can help you make those brain connections into English.
Wow.
Now, the more you as a coachee have that common language, maybe you're at an intermediate stage or sort of a past beginner that we can communicate, it doesn't so much matter that I know Hindi, but it matters that I know how to ask the right questions.
Okay.
So I've asked a lot of questions to people who are Polish, Czech, Hungarian, etc. I ask them the questions to find out, how is this in your language? Explain it to me. Because that also helps me to understand, for example, Polish people. I don't know if you've noticed, they have great difficulty to use the words the table. They'll probably say table. They won't say the. And that's because in their language, that article does not exist.
Right.
Now, if I know that as the coach, I know that my Polish speaker, we need to make neural connections right from zero, like a child's brain. I need to help that learner to understand a concept that does not exist in their brain.
Mm.
And that's the important thing for us to understand as a coach. How can I help that learner? Where is that learner's difficulty? Because in their brain, that concept doesn't exist, or it's a totally different way in their language.
Running this brand, this Neurolanguage Coaching concept, what are the challenges at the moment for you as a business professional?
I'm just grateful at the moment. I think my challenges were 8 years ago.
Right.
When it was me on my own against the world, trying to bring out something that nobody understood, nobody knew. It was also, for me, it was a learning process of how to explain it, how to develop it, getting the course going. And those first people jumping on the course, I will be eternally grateful for them, because they are the ones that helped me to get it going. And you know, for me, it's been 7 years of pushing that boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
7 years of really, you know, and people don't understand, you know, when you're developing something like that. I had no financial backing. Nobody helped me. I was on my knees many times. I was on the edge of bankruptcy many times.
Wow.
So at this point, I don't feel like there's a challenge. I just feel like saying thank you, that at the moment we are rolling and we are turning heads. And I have to say that I'm also grateful for these years, because what's happened is that we have set a very quiet, solid foundation.
Right.
And it's taken a long time to do that, but it is very, very steady and solid. And that I'm grateful for. And from here, everything is, well, you know, life at the moment is an open book. We're all creating life at the moment.
Mm.
And all of the teachers and trainers who are doing this course with me are co-creating. We're co-creating the new world. Sanj, it's the most amazing moment in history.
So what advice would you give to someone who was in your shoes 7 years ago?
I would say that when you're in those shoes, you have to get ready to lose everything to become everything. It's almost like a process that you have to firstly face yourself, face your fears. You have to go on the edge. You have to be tipped over. You have to stand up again. You have to brush yourself down. You have to keep going. You have to, it is such a test of resilience. And it's almost like you have to lose yourself to totally find that everything.
Right.
And you get to the point where you realize that nothing matters. If I have food, I have shelter, I'm breathing, nothing else matters.
Mm.
That's the point you get to.
To truly appreciate everything that you have around you, as opposed to looking over that fence at something that you'll get to, but will take time.
Yes, and you know, I smile because I know that a lot of people along the way think that I was raking in the money. I've heard that before. Raking in the money and doing this. What they don't realize is all the debts that were coming from, you know, my side. I lived with so many of those debts to try and get this moving. Mm. And I've got to the point, for me, the essence of what I'm doing is the most important thing, the passion, the drive, the change. You know, neurolanguage coaching is not about language, only about language learning. For me, this is about bringing this into schools. It's about bringing it into other topics, other teachers, other, you know, like maths, physics. All teachers, for me, should be going through this process of rediscovering how to change, enhance, and provoke a different learning process.
Wow.
So for me, that is the drive, that's the passion, that's the motivation. And you know, when I started to think about doing this, it was about 2007, 2008, and I sat with somebody. I'd set up my company for the first time, and I sat with this gentleman who, his wife was my very good friend, and unfortunately we lost her to leukemia.
I'm so sorry.
And we sat there and he was sort of talking to me about the business and working, and I was working very hard in those days. And he said to me, well, why are you doing this, Rachel? Why don't you just relax and just chill, you know, and just life is too short. And I said to him, no, what I want is to set up a foundation. I want to set up an educational foundation. This is about changing. And that was in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're very close to that point. And now it's like, wow. And for me, nothing else matters. Sanj, I don't need a big car. I don't need a big house. I don't need anything.
No one does.
That's right. We don't. What we need is each other.
Yep.
We need, and we've proven that this year. We've suddenly woken up this year that what is important is us.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling that now. Like, I've always been very embracing of everything around me, but I'm starting to hear that when I go outside and see that people understand that a long commute in a big cage to a place where you're miserable isn't what life's about.
That's right.
It's
Absolutely.
too short.
It is too short, and it's too beautiful.
Yeah.
To be doing that. This year, we're all starting to understand that we want a different life.
I can feel the world is changing for good,
Yeah.
which is a refreshing thing to feel. So you're based in Spain now, and obviously Spain is very close to you, but you went there when you were starting off as a professional at quite a young age. Tell us about your connection with Spain and why it's so important to you.
It's fascinating because my father had a travel agency in the 1960s.
Wow.
And he used to bring people to this area of Spain. So the first time I came to this area in Spain was actually in my mother's stomach in 1966. So now everybody can work out how old I am. So literally, this has almost been like my second home.
Right.
We would come 2-3 times a year on a holiday, and then we kept coming every year. And then at the age of 15, that's when I met my future husband, and he actually was in military service for 2 years. So we were writing to each other, and that's when I was writing and learning Spanish. And then at the age of 17, that's when I came and I stayed.
Right.
And I was here for 12 years. And when I was here in those 12 years, it was that time when no internet existed. Even telephones didn't really exist. In Spain, we did not have a telephone at home. And it was only like 6 months later that we got the telephone, but then we never used it because it was so expensive. So you looked at the phone, but you never touched it. So I was constantly speaking in Spanish. I was totally immersed, I guess, as a Spaniard. So I do think that I have a Spanish personality. And interestingly, when I separated from my husband and I went back home, I'll never forget, my father actually said to me, "You need to anglicize yourself again, young lady." And I thought, oh dear, am I so Spanish at this point, And so I have a very Latin personality side to me somewhere.
Right.
And now I've come full circle. I was living in Germany and Italy for 15 years and sometimes commuting Germany, Italy. But German weather and German life is very similar to English weather and English life.
Yep.
And I was desperate to get back to the beach, the sea, and Spain. And I've managed to do it. I've come full circle 25 years later.
And how long have you been there since you've gone back?
Last December.
Oh,
I
okay.
moved just last year. I was in France for some time before that. And I moved last December. I was very lucky. I found a beautiful place to rent. And again, it was like everything fell into place. And then I came just before Christmas, December, and then March, we were locked down.
Yeah.
And I was very happy to be locked down here because I do feel for people who live in the cities. I'm very, very grateful. I live in the countryside.
So tell us about Sitges, is that how you pronounce it?
Sitges is where I used to live. I now live in the countryside at the back of Tarragona, which is towards the Montsant Hills, the Priorat mountain area.
Okay.
Priorat is one of the best DOC wines in Spain, by the way.
Right.
For all those wine lovers out there.
I love wine.
You need to try this one, really. Priorat, Priorat. Some people may know this area because there is a very touristy place called Salou, or Salou, the English call it. But there's also quite a few little fishing villages along the way, one of them very famous called Cambrils. And Sitges is further towards Barcelona, so I'm about 1.5 hours away from Barcelona.
Nice, one of my favourite cities.
Yes, definitely. So in normal times when we don't have COVID, it's quite easy to get in and out. And it's about 40 minutes from Sitges where I am. So I can go back regularly. I still have ex-family here, a lot of my old friends here from 25 years ago. And it's just an amazing feeling to be back.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of reigniting an explorative part of your life.
Yes, and when my husband and I really were constantly working. We were busy. When we were running our business, we worked all the hours under the sun. So I don't think I didn't really enjoy the surroundings. I didn't really enjoy the beach, everything. You know, when you live in a place and you're working so many hours, it's very difficult to perceive the environment. And especially at that age, you know, in your 20s, when you're in your work mode, in your married life mode, it can easily take over.
Yeah.
Now I'm at an age where I am perceiving my environment, I'm loving it, and I'm living it.
Do you think that approach you're having now has become because of what you've been doing for the last 7 to 8 years?
Definitely. And, you know, as I said, I feel that I've liberated my brain.
Yeah.
At some point in my life, at the age of 11, I suffered a childhood trauma. And trauma, honestly, changes the brain. May I say that I think most people live trauma in their lives. And one of the famous authors, Bessel van der Kolk, he says 90% of the population will suffer trauma at some point in their life. Yeah. So, you know, it could be anybody as a child or anybody later in life. It really is inevitable. And by the way, I'm grateful for that historical moment in my life because that also changed me.
Yeah.
And sent me in a different direction.
I'm generalizing here. I only know this because of the neuroscience module I did on this course I did at Harvard. A lot of people are just starting to get to grips with what neuroplasticity is and how trauma can change you, but you can also change your mind so that you can pull yourself out of the negative aspects of that trauma and push yourself into a positive mindset.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really important thing to understand because a lot of people look, and I'm generalizing here, sometimes there's a spotlight on someone's attitude or personality and you can go, well, it's because of their past and it's because of where they come from. So I'm going to switch off on that person. But what I found really beautiful about learning about neuroplasticity was that everyone deserves a second chance, no matter what's happened to them. And that person can become good no matter what. I think it's a really important thing to identify.
Absolutely. You know, in those first 7 years of life, it is absolutely key that in those first 7 years, children are, if you like, really sheltered because everything that we take in those first 7 years is coming subconsciously into the brain without us filtering it because we don't develop that prefrontal cortex until after the age of 7.
Right.
So everything that's coming in is being absorbed, even in those early teenage years. You know, we're taking things in that are not being filtered. They're not being rationalized or analyzed. So we could be creating subconscious patterns without us realizing it. And that can also shape our behaviors, our personalities, our systems of belief, everything. And the real beauty is, yes, we now know that we can change the brain. Mm-hmm. I grew up, you know, as a 60s, 70s baby, I grew up kind of thinking that you get to the age of 40 and 50 and that's it. You go downhill after that and then you die.
Yeah.
That was my pessimistic view of life, you know. And now at this age, in my 50s, it's like, no, I've just started living.
Wow.
And this is the change. But I personally think that we are not living neuroplasticity enough.
Absolutely.
Because what happens, and if we take this from a general viewpoint, and obviously this isn't going to apply to everybody, but a lot of us, and I think it happened to me too, when you get into your 20s and your 30s, you've got everything under routine. You're in your automatic programs, you can do everything, you're the master of everything. But then suddenly you wake up one day and you go, is this it? Is this it for the rest of my life? And I think that's where sometimes we come into that 40s midlife crisis where we think, what else is there? But then when we want to change, the brain actually goes, whoa, I don't like change. I like your routine. I like you sitting on the sofa doing nothing. It's okay. And there you've got the resistance of the brain, because the brain knows that if we need to do new things, we need more focus, we need more energy, we need more energy. And the brain doesn't like that. Because when we're running on those subconscious programs, the brain is quite happily cruising along without too much energy.
Do you think society has an impact on how the brain thinks about how to change?
I do. I do think that we live in a very judgmental world. One of the things over the last years that I've really wanted to do is to remove judgment. And that as well is part of being a coach. Nothing is to be judged at all. Anybody sitting in front of me, whatever they think, they feel, they share with me, there is absolutely no judgment. And that is something that we all, I think, if we lived in a world where we're not judging each other, where we're actually encouraging each other and we're saying, wow, I really respect what you think. I may have a different opinion, but I respect what you think. So what are you going to do with your opinion? Or how can I sort of understand more about your opinion? Instead of judging that person and walking away and saying, oh, that person thinks this, so I'm not even going to talk to them. If we can remove judgment, we can allow people to change and grow, I think, faster.
Yeah. Another assumption I'm going to throw at you, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming you've had to deal with a lot of judgment when you're bringing disruptive ideas within environments where the norm has been going a certain direction and you've come in and said, well, actually, let's try something different. How do you deal with that challenge?
Personally, I think I had a lot more exposure to judgment earlier in my life. So I think I also had, sometimes we have family judgments that we have to live with. Sometimes we have people around us. I'll never forget when I was studying at the law firm, when we were in those final years of me qualifying as a lawyer, I'll never forget one of the trainee lawyers saying to me, oh, well, you are a bit eccentric, aren't you, Rachel? And I thought, whoa, that hurts.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It's like, So, I've had judgments throughout my life. And for many, many years, it hurts. And we now know also from the neuroscience about social and emotional pain and how it really impacts the brain in the same area as physical pain. So I look back in my life and I think, whoa, social and emotional pain constantly. And then bringing out this concept, absolutely. I've had attacks left, right, and center. Even like 2 or 3 years ago, there was one particular person who was laying into me, even on social media.
Gosh.
Now, I've learned how to come through that. Oh, and by the way, last December, even at an award ceremony, one of the, let's say, professors even was laying into me.
Oh, gosh.
That was a recent one. But now I've learned to handle it. And yes, it hurts, in those moments when somebody is throwing a judgment and it's a very strong judgment. But then you sort of think, okay, I can see that this is a judgment from that person. This person doesn't really know me. They don't know the concept. They don't know what this is about. But the sad thing is that that person isn't taking the time to find out.
Yeah.
That's the sad thing. But this is a reflection of what's happening in the world with all of us. And if we can change that, if we can start to appreciate each other, acknowledge each other, recognize each other, try to find out about something. If you don't know it and you're starting to judge it, catching ourselves and saying, okay, let me find out about this first, and then let me then afterwards give my opinion.
Yeah.
If we could move into a world like that, how amazing would the world be?
Absolutely. Wow.
and I think as well, just to add, a lot of this also comes from self-judgment. And if we can also start to be gentle with ourselves and start to understand that a lot of what we may think or do or the way that we behave actually might come from subconscious programs and patterns that have been instilled from childhood, from bad moments, from social and emotional pain, then we can also learn to work with ourselves. And we can learn to forgive ourselves and to find out, okay, well, how could I change? How can I get in to find out what is that pattern? How can I change it?
Wow.
And then we come back now to neuroplasticity.
Rachel, this has been mind-blowing.
Good.
No, this is cool.
Honestly,
really cool.
If I can give the gift to younger people than myself, I would say that I've liberated my brain in the last 4 years since I've become 50, and now I'm 54.
Wow.
If we can give this gift of even children learning how to manage themselves, manage their brains right from an early age, and if we can go through life understanding our reactions, understanding our social and emotional pain, understanding how to communicate with other people, I do think that this is also going to be part of this transformational process that we're all going through.
Rachel, we're coming towards the end of the discussion. I feel like we can talk forever. There's so many things I'd love to pick your brain about, specifically with regards to just some of the experience you've had. So I definitely want to get you involved in some of the other things that we do, including Creative Futures and maybe even another call on Tiger Heart Chats.
I'd love to.
It's been really, really wonderful to speak to you. If anyone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
There are a couple of umbrella websites. There is the Neurolanguagecoaching.com website.
Yeah.
We're also now creating the neurohearteducation.com. So those umbrella websites will then lead people to all the things that we're doing. And if anybody does want to drop me a line personally, then info@efficientlanguagecoaching.com.
Cool. I'll put that in the liner notes. So if anyone's listening, just have a look out for that. And are you on any social media?
I am definitely on LinkedIn. So do connect with me on LinkedIn, anybody. Facebook as well. Although I've just been given the warning that I'm at 5,000 capacity. So I think on Facebook it might be difficult, but there are the business pages on Facebook as well. Also Instagram. Absolutely delighted if people want to connect with me. And I'm doing a brain challenge at the moment.
Right.
So we are on day 22 of my September brain challenge.
Okay.
Which is a little bit of sort of anecdotes about the brain every day. And again, my desire is that we all start to manage our brains.
Awesome.
Get to know ourselves.
Brilliant. Well, look, this has been wonderful. Those of you that are listening, I just want to thank you guys for hanging with us. I know it's been a while since we've done the last Tiger Heart Chats, but we're getting so much positive feedback from everyone that's listening. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe and sound. And whatever you're doing, please be good.